Welcome to the Earth Keepers podcast. This podcast is for people who seek new and better ways to love and care for the earth. It's a podcast for anyone who is deeply concerned about the harm being done to the environment on a local and global level. It's a podcast that builds community and connection between people of like heart and mind, people who believe that earth care should be integrated into every aspect of life, and for many in the Earth Keepers community, that includes our spiritual lives. As you may know, in Season 3 of the podcast, we're dedicating a good number of our episodes to the exploration of environmental justice themes. In this episode, we'll be talking with Mathews Malata Jr., an environmental journalist and president of the Association of Environmental Journalists in Malawi. He and his colleagues are dedicated to bringing attention to serious environmental concerns. Oftentimes, that means uncovering systemic corruption, but also advocating for more just policies on topics like forestry, waste management, and the protection of green spaces. Journalists like Mathews seek to make people more aware of the impacts of the ongoing climate crisis and the need for every Malawi citizen to work for the preservation and protection of their beautiful country. At the same time, Mathews points out that the struggle for environmental justice is a global one, since most of the catastrophic impacts of climate change in Malawi are actually caused by the harmful habits of nations in the global north.
We need to slow down on anything else that's really contributing to damaging our planet. We don't have planet B. We only have one planet. And I think we need to coexist with nature. We must realize that whatever little action we do has got a bearing on the environment. You are killing people down here. I know sometimes when people are in their comfortable spaces, the way you can explain climate change when you're in Glasgow, UK, United States, Netherlands, wherever it is, they're going to show it's different from what it is this other side of the world. It's really tough. It's made life complicated for many. And I think we need to reconsider some of the options and decisions that we continue to make as leaders, but also as citizens.
Welcome, friends, to the Earth Keepers podcast. Well, Mathews, welcome, and thank you for being on the podcast. Perhaps you could tell our listeners a bit about yourself and about your work with the Association of Environmental Journalists in Malawi.
Thank you so much indeed, Doc, for the opportunity that we can really share interesting perspectives from Malawi regarding how we're caring about nature and all that. So basically, I'm a journalist, but my work really has been on environmental communication. I've got about 15 years of experience or more in the sector, but I think it's been 10 years reporting on environment issues. Mm-hmm. I'm currently the president of the Association of Environmental Journalists in Malawi, a grouping of media professionals interested in reporting on environment issues across the country and beyond. But above that, I'm also a member of the Movement for Environmental Action in Malawi, an NGO that also tries to focus on environmental justice issues. And I'm in a couple of boards for some of the environmental governing institutions, for example, the Zalanyama Conservation Trust. And I'm also part of the National Steering Committee on Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management. So, in a nutshell, that's how I would explain myself. But I really sum up all this in one statement to say I think I'm just someone who is really interested and passionate about nature.
Yeah, and I would like to know more about that. As a journalist who covers many issues, why have environmental issues in particular become the focus of so much of your work?
I think Malawi is one of the best countries to be, so beautiful, really nice. But I think we have had issues in as far as caring for the environment is concerned. I grew up in a district where we had rich forests, but then there was also a lot of tobacco farming. and there was a lot of wood that was being used for tobacco processing. We have grown up in a setup where, for example, littering doesn't really matter. It's not an issue. And then with time, when I was doing my first job, it was in Blantyre, I got a chance to really be trained on some of the environmental issues, and that really opened up my mind to say, I think there are lots of things that you're not doing right. And then I started to develop special interest in environment issues. I mean, I had been reporting on politics, health, business, and all that. But I think this was like my turning point. It really occurred to me that there was a huge gap which us journalists were not really trying to address. And that's when I linked up with my colleagues to say, look, we seem to be very obsessed with political reporting, health and all that, but I think we are really ignoring one of the most important sectors, and that is the environment. How do we make sure that you are able to bridge the information gap that's there, for example, between our scientists at the university or all these institutions of higher learning and the people on the ground, so that we can begin to make a difference, because communication plays a key role. Mm-hmm. So we started this organization, and slowly there are a couple of things that I've been doing. For example, I've been focusing on capacity building, content development, campaigns, research, and all that. So it's personal. There's just really a strong touch that I have towards the environment. And yeah, that has been the journey up to now.
Have you found that there's been a lot of receptivity to that shift of focus onto environmental issues?
It's been a mixed arrangement. There are some journalists really that I've seen merit in making sure that we focus on environmental reporting, but we still have got some, I think, who feel like it's a complicated bit to concentrate on, more especially because of the perceived science that is associated with the environmental issues or environmental reporting. But I always tell my colleagues that an environment story can be communicated from different perspectives, because an environment story is a human interesting story. It is a story really that touches on our daily life. It can be a story that can be developed from a health perspective. It could be also a political story. It can be a business story, but with an environment face. And this is what I keep on explaining to people, that an environment story is a health story. All you need to know is to understand all the issues that are really happening in the environment sector and begin to make the connections so that you can really come up with a nice story that communicates about all these things. So by the end of the day, it's about systems thinking, and also I think that can always be applied as far as how we tackle and frame up these stories is concerned.
You earlier used the phrase environmental justice, and it brings up a question in me. As a professor of community development, I've watched a shift taking place in my field, and until recently, relief and development work tended to focus mostly on social justice issues like human rights or poverty or global health disparities, issues that were centered mostly around the promotion of human flourishing, but increasingly, issues of environmental justice have gained more attention in the realm of development. I wonder if you could comment on the relationship as you see it between social justice and environmental justice, especially as that plays out in Malawi.
Environmental justice, I think, to many, still sounds like a new term, something that people are still trying to internalize. But for me, it goes back to the fact that you cannot really separate these two. Social injustice and environmental injustice, I think they are pretty much connected. I'll give you this example. Malawi, yes, has been affected hugely by the impacts of climate change, and this has resulted in a number of disruptions in as far as development is concerned. What it means is that agricultural production and productivity keeps on going down just because we are not getting the amount of rains that we are supposed to receive due to the climatic changes that have occurred. Yet Malawi contributes almost insignificantly to the global challenge, the climate change issue, but we are the ones bearing the burden and our people are suffering. So what that means is that if people are not able to produce what they're supposed to produce for their food security, nutrition security, but also for business, it means that that also affects their income. And if they are not able to do certain things just because their income has been really reduced due to the climatic issues, that is really not fair because they can't really live freely. They can't do the things that they are required to do on a daily basis. And this is why I'm saying you connect these issues every time and again. And I think there are also linkages when it comes to climate change and health. If you have got an increase, for example, with a number of diseases, people being admitted, hospitalized now and again for things that were avoidable, I really think that's a great social issue which is being really exacerbated by issues that are happening in the way we are managing our environment. So for me, these two are really linked because by the end of the day, what's happening is that our people, this side, are suffering because of what is happening on the other side of the world, the global north. And I think this is why we always emphasize that I think those that are responsible for polluting Mother Earth should really make sure that they are able to pay, but also help countries that have been hit badly by the adverse impacts of climate change so that at least we can minimize the suffering that they're experiencing.
And of course, that very issue was at the heart of discussions at COP26, the annual UN Conference on Climate Change in Glasgow this year. I'm wondering, what was your experience of reporting on that event like? Did you come away more encouraged or more discouraged about the potential for international collaboration on climate issues?
Indeed, Glasgow was interesting. 38,000 people meeting in one place, 192 parties discussing a very complex issue. And I think it is hard to expect a consensus on many things. However, I think the meeting was necessary and COP meetings are necessary indeed. And this time around, more specifically, because people were meeting amid the COVID-19 crisis. It wasn't easy for the host country because there are a lot of logistics involved. But I like the energy, the courage, the determination that was really displayed by all the concerned countries. I think it really showed to me that I think we are all interested in this crisis, but more important in making sure that we provide the solutions that we need in order to address the climate crisis. I know you have written about maybe how best the COVID-19 crisis has also helped to connect people in a dramatic way. There are opportunities that have occurred, people communicating online and all that. But I think it was really important this time around that people should meet physically and deal with some of the issues. This is why we saw, I think, progress in a couple of areas. For example, issues to do with coal. We are saying, I think it's not time for promoting fossil fuels and all that, even coal production. We have been speaking against this, and there hasn't been movement for quite some time. But I think out of this meeting, we noticed that there was somehow an agreement to phase down coal production. They were very clever in the way they framed everything. So they're talking about phasing down, which we think really provides green light, but I think we need to make sure we follow up on some of these commitments, and the countries that are pledging to do this should really come up with more practical measures to make sure that whatever they are committing is really done, because it's not going to be easy, but we have to do this. We don't have an option. Otherwise, we'll be heading for a major catastrophe that we have never experienced before. There was also, I think, a lot of talk around mitigation programs, loss and damage. For the first time, I think it was really given huge attention, and been a discussion to do with the rules book so that which has been outstanding for some time. How do you make sure that the Paris Agreement is operationalized? What are some of the guidelines? So there's supposed to be a rules book in place. People have been discussing about this for quite some time. It's been dragging, but I think COP26 did manage to deliver this one. And Malawi also made a declaration or signed a commitment in reversing and halting deforestation by 2030, which I think is also quite exciting. But as good as all these things may sound, including issues to do with increasing funds for adaptation, there was a $100 billion US commitment which countries were supposed to deliver, but most of them did not. And they're trying to find new mechanisms of coming up with another financing, mechanism which is going to be high and all that, based on scientific data and all that. But for me, what we are saying is that if they failed to commit to the 100 billion in the past, chances that they could also fail to commit to the new pledges are also high, because most of the things are really voluntary. They are not legally binding, and that's where it becomes tricky. So yes, all these things came out as positives, but we really need to make sure that we follow through, and then we should get genuine and serious commitments. Otherwise, we have seen pretenders at such meetings, especially COP. People say this on the podiums, but when they go back, I think funny things happen, and then you don't deliver on such commitments. The crisis continues, and then people in the South and other countries or other parts of the world continue to experience the worst, and things may go bad if we don't do anything, at least according to the IPCC report, which we all know about.
Well, there are plenty of voices from the global South who say that COP26 didn't go far enough. And relatively speaking, Malawi, for example, contributes very little to the factors that cause climate change, and yet Malawi is disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. So I'm wondering if we could talk about that, and in particular, talk about what are some of those impacts and how does it change people's lives in Malawi?
That's an interesting question, Prof. I'll go back to emphasize that Malawi is an agri-based nation. I think we still rely on agriculture. Yes, we have got mining, tourism, and other things, but I think the contribution to the national GDP, I think, is still very low, and in some cases, is significant. But agriculture remains big. It's the mainstay of our economy. Now, if we continue to experience extreme weather events, you're looking at floods, and at the same time you have got drought and all that, what that means is that our agriculture production obviously is going to be affected directly. Then that extends to issues of nutrition, health, economy, and all that. So environment anchors everything. So once there is that kind of interruption, really targeting the agriculture sector, it means even all these other value chains are also affected. And by the end of the day, you cannot even talk about achieving the sustainable development goals that we are all eyeing, at least by 2030. You cannot really talk about improving the human development. All these things, they are really affected. You should expect worsening poverty levels. You should expect shrinking income and all those things. You should expect continued damage to infrastructure. As you know, that we keep on having these floods now and again. Just like when rainy season at the moment here in Malawi, it's been raining heavily, of course, from January. And we have had urban floods almost in all the capital or major cities. Lilongwe have had floods. In Blantyre have had floods, destroying property, injuries and all that. So you know what that means. It's got an impact on people's lives, the entire economy, the infrastructure being damaged every now and again. That's like something that has been recurrent for years. The question is, how do we break that cycle? Because before you recover from this disaster, another one hits and you are back to square one. You see government officials and partners coming up with a recovery plan. But before you start implementing it, while you're still mobilizing resources for this recovery plan, another disaster hits. So there is no space for breathing. There's no space for people to really implement even some of these recovery programs. And it's as bad as that. And I think this is where we need to make sure that everyone is serious about providing sustainable but also workable and practical solutions to the climate crisis. And we should also avoid doing what one size fits all kind of approach. Let's understand the context of issues. What are the real challenges that Malawi is experiencing? How best can we assist them? People are talking about electric cars, but Malawi, I don't think at the moment we need electric cars. I think we need technologies that can really help our agriculture sector to be resilient before we start talking about electric cars. But maybe there are countries up there that they would look at electric cars as a priority. We have about 18 million people. Only 12% of these have access to electricity, be it for lighting or for cooking, meaning that 80% plus of people, they stay in the dark. They cook using firewood, charcoal. So you can't start talking about electric cars with such kind of an audience. I think you need to go down and deal with the basics. The problem is really big, and it becomes very complex to deal with it whenever all these issues with poverty are also interlinked.
So I understand that one of the goals of AEJM is to promote awareness of environmental issues to the general public. And I'm wondering, when it comes to ordinary citizens of your country, how aware are they about the unfairness of the price that Malawi citizens pay for the damage done by the industrial world? And I'm wondering, do people feel angry or resigned? How do they hold on to hope?
The key thing, as you put it, indeed, is that we need to continuously provide the right information to the people so that they have the right perspective, but also attitudes towards the problem. That's when you can really begin to implement the solutions. But unfortunately, not many have that big connection, which can strongly translate to the anger that we see, for example, in the West. Many are aware, of course, that climate has changed, and they can explain that better, actually. But it is mostly linked to the cutting down of trees, because I think we have lost our forest cover massively, and we continue to lose about 32,000 hectares of forest almost each and every year, which is quite serious, and we're losing about 29, if not 30 tons of soil per hectare per year, and that is also serious. But beyond that, I think they can't explain much, especially the local people. But if you look at some of the leaders, NGOs, some of the government players that are closer to climate change issues, yes, they're able to explain about all these things, and we all have the same concern, and we only hope that with time can be able to resolve some of these things.
When you look at what's going on in Malawi today, are there actually projects or initiatives that benefit the environment that make you have hope?
Sure. I think we are trying. We have a couple of initiatives that are going on. As Malawi, we submitted what they call the nationally determined contributions. These are like our commitments, for example, our country as a country to the UNFCCC, in as far as the things that we will do as our contribution in order to solve the climate crisis. And we have been implementing some of them. We just revised and submitted fresh ones. And if we continue to implement them, obviously we should expect to better lives of most of the people. And there are a couple of other initiatives that Environmental Affairs Department, Ministry of Agriculture, and local government and others are also implementing in the country, including the NGOs, are also doing a tremendous job. But I think what we need to do is to continuously coordinate, make sure that we are not operating in silos. We should increase our international cooperation, but also issues of transparency, accountability, they are very key. As you might be aware, corruption is also rampant. So what we need to make sure is that the resources are getting to the right people. They must hit the ground, and make sure that we minimize on things that would really not benefit the majority that are experiencing some of these problems. So there is indeed hope. There is goodwill from a couple of partners within the country and beyond. We did appreciate that. And if we stay course, I'm sure, by prioritizing some of the technologies that we need to implement as a country, there have been a couple of studies that have been done by all these institutions of higher learning, and they are promising. We have lots of policies policies that are interesting, robust policies. Okay, I think Malawi is one of the best countries, as far as developing policies is concerned. Maybe our challenge is only implementation, resources, but also the discipline to stay on course when implementing programs. But we have robust policies that can really help drive out the people from this crisis.
So would you say that in the fight for environmental justice, do you think the government of Malawi is on balance a force for positive change, or is it in some ways a matter of having to work around government restrictions, that most people are doing this on their own without government support?
I think the government is really trying, as you are aware, that you can't really implement most of the climate change programs without working with existing government structures at district level, even regional or national level. I think it's practically impossible. The government has created space for various players, including the donor community development partners that are interested to work within Malawi. The government has expressed commitment. I talked about Malawi having robust policies in various sectors where the environment is concerned. We have signed a couple of commitments locally and internationally. So there is that will from the government. But perhaps what we need to do more as a country is to translate that commitment into something that's tangible, physical, some progress. And I think that's where we need the strong allies, civil society that is very strong, the media that is very strong and informed, but also the community must be able to stand up and demand what belongs to them. Because government is government, politicians are politicians, so you can't really trust the government on everything. We still have to come hard on them on certain things and make sure that they deliver. They can make commitments in all these policies I'm talking about, but to deliver is something different. When it comes to budgetary allocations, environment in Malawi still gets less than 1%. So these are the issues. If environment anchors everything, and then we have got a budget that really only absorbs 1% for environmental initiatives, then that shows lack of seriousness somehow. Much as we've got other funds coming from development partners and all that, but I think charity begins at home. We need to also show and demonstrate that whatever we speak or indicate in our policies, we're also ready to implement by providing the necessary resources so that we can hit the ground.
So it seems to me that journalism would be an important factor in empowering people to demand those things, empowering people to feel like they can make a difference, empowering people to believe that they shouldn't rely on the government for the change that needs to happen. Would you see it the same way?
Absolutely. There are certain things that we need to continuously empower the people to do. For example, the caring of trees. We are now, I think, going through what we call the national forestry season. We plant trees intensively, I think, from December up to April. These are the things that you don't wait for the government to come and tell you plant more trees. It must be a personal issue. We don't have to be selfish. The trees, the shade, the fresh air we are enjoying today is because our parents did a good job in planting these trees. The mangoes, the whatever we are enjoying today is because someone did a good job. And I think we need to do the same so that as we hand over the nation to the other generation, they should find it at least in a good state. And that's what I think that communities at whatever level, they can really try to make sure that they're able to plant more trees, but also take care of the existing trees, regardless of the energy demands that we have. Because whenever people see trees, they see charcoal for cooking and all that. But I think we also need to have some discipline and make sure that we're able to think about the next generations and maintain the environment so they can continue to have the good rains. But also the trees help in as far as charging the underground water is concerned, reduce issues of soil erosion, the siltation of our rivers. Most of the rivers keep on disappearing now because of the heavy erosion that is happening. And that is not really good even for aquatic species and all that. So yes, there are certain things that are within our control and we need to keep on doing them, not just once, but repeatedly until we see change.
It seems to me that issues like the relationship between cooking and a forest those are not self-evident relationships, that I would see journalism as having a role in educating people about the system, that if charcoal cooking is your only option, then ultimately that's going to not only pollute the air and decrease human health, but also reduce forests. And I think that journalism has an important role to play there in helping people to understand those relationships so that they know why they're doing tree conservation or tree planting.
You are very right. And just recently, we just concluded and we should be launching the dossier, which has got a couple of investigative stories that we're just focusing on the forestry sector, and the interesting revelations came up. Lots of discoveries, lots of interesting issues really in that dossier. And mostly, I think we realize and we learn that indeed we have got a crisis in as far as the energy issues are concerned. Energy poverty is real here in Malawi. And it is also true that most of the people still rely on the biomass, charcoal in this case, for cooking. And that some of the alternatives, for example, you're looking at gas, LPG, much as it's still not good for the environment. But at least maybe that's what we need to use at the moment. I don't know, but it's still expensive to get gas. Even the setup, the landing cost here, it's very expensive. And they find that not many people use gas for cooking here in Malawi. And electricity is also a challenge. Like I said, you have got about 12-14% of people with access to electricity. That means that the other group is left out, and you can guess what they're using for cooking and all that. So indeed, we need to continuously remind the people that we need to take care of the trees because they're also servicing us. There are lots of ecosystem benefits or services that we get from the forests, and that's why we need to try as much as we can to replenish the trees that we are destroying or we are harvesting illegally or legally. But the only challenge is that they've got issues to do with, for example, rapid population growth. You've got issues of high urbanization, and it's really becoming a challenge to catch up. It looks like the distraction is outpacing whatever you're doing to replace whatever you've destroyed.
Many listeners to this podcast live in the global north or wealthier nations, and as hard as it is to face truth, they sincerely want to know the truth about climate injustice, especially on a global scale. So first, I want to thank you for speaking truth to the world, as you do through journalism. But I also wanted to ask, what should be the response of those living in countries that, in fact, are causing the most damage to the planet by the way we live our lives and the standards of living that we demand?
We need to slow down on anything else that's really contributing to damaging our planet. We don't have planet B. We only have one planet. And I think we need to coexist with nature. We must realize that whatever little action we do has got a bearing on the environment. You are killing people down here. I know sometimes when people are in their comfortable spaces, the way you can explain climate change when you're in Glasgow, UK, United States, Netherlands, wherever it is, they're going to show it's different from what it is this other side of the world. It's really tough. It's made life complicated for many. And I think we need to reconsider some of the options and decisions that we continue to make as leaders, but also as citizens. Most importantly, because the damage has already been done, my thinking is that we need also to seriously think about adaptation programs that are really helpful, but also practical and workable for countries like Malawi. Let's support these countries to implement these programs. We're looking at technological transfer. Let's have the right technology developed within context. It has to be cheap, easy to maintain, low cost, user-friendly, so that we can continue to thrive our agriculture sector regardless of the changing climate. Research is also vital. We can help in capacitating our institutions of higher learning so that they have the right capacity, which they can transfer to the students and all that, and then help to maintain the health and be able to continue to survive regardless of the crisis. But maybe finally, what I would say is that we need to be genuine in the discussions that we are having around climate change. What I've noted, I think everything about climate change negotiations is very political and predictable. You have got huge barons, business icons that contribute. They can interfere, and whatever decisions that are made, you find that they are not really in the interest of the common person who is facing the struggle. They have got their own interests as well. Issues of phasing down coal. I don't think business people would really take this thing easily. You have got countries that maybe solely rely on coal for the economy and all that. If they're going to switch to something green, how easy is it going to be for them? And are they really ready to do this? So they must do that because we are suffering. And if we don't do anything about this, I think it's going to be terrible. Just today, I was interacting with a climate change expert. And what she was explaining to me is that because we didn't have the rains, in Malawi, the rainy season starts from around September. Okay, but what happened this year has never happened before. From September up to December, we had no rains. It's been dry. And what she told me, she's analyzing data, which she's going to share with us at some point. But already I think she has got a feeling that this is the worst dry period that we have ever had as a country since 1960 or 70. So that's interesting. This is clear evidence that I think climate is real. We continue to be affected. And it's no longer about just figures and projections or IPCC reports. No, it's real. And the results on the ground are not good. Because as you speak now, there's a lot of uncertainty in as far as what the farmers are going to harvest from the fields now. Because maybe by March, the rains will be gone and most of the things in the field will not have matured. The capacity for irrigation is very slow. And then we should be a country now begging for food again and all that, which you're not supposed to do just because of some actions that are being done up there. And that is not real. That is not true.
Yeah, I think there's really something powerful in that observation about seeing things as real. I remember seeing global news coverage of the cyclone that devastated Malawi in 2019. And in that moment, I thought, this is in part my responsibility. Like, my behavior is connected to the fact that this is one of the worst weather-related disasters to hit the Southern Hemisphere. And it was hard for me to hold on to that connection. I found myself wanting to pull back from that sense of responsibility that my actions, my lifestyle actually had an impact on people in Malawi. So I'm not sure what to say about that, except that in some ways it's a discipline for people who are living in the global north to always make that connection, to understand that what we do doesn't just impact our immediate environment, that we have a global effect, a global impact on other people's lives, and in some cases a very serious impact.
Correct. I agree with you, and I'm glad you followed the second issue. It was quite devastating. People lost their lives, property got damaged. It wasn't really good. All the crops were damaged, and we have not fully recovered up to now. And indeed, I would like to encourage our listener that we must take these issues personal. We must feel guilt indeed when we feel like the choices that we're taking are not just for our planet Earth. They have got an impact somewhere, and someone is struggling because of that.
I'm wondering about you. You're doing hard work. Truth speaking is hard, especially if there's resistance from various factions. I'm wondering, how do you hold on to hope?
There are small victories that we encounter in the process. And I think those are the things that really inspire some of us. It has not been easy to report as a journalist and then at the same time also put on a hat for an activist of some sort, because all these two, they've got their own rules. You need to make sure that you're able to balance whatever you're doing. You're not trying to put yourself in an awkward situation whereby you're always fighting with the government. but you don't also want to be too nice to the government unnecessarily so. Aside issues of climate change, we have participated in a couple of issues anyway: policy development, consultations, development of key messages, communication strategies, and all that. That's our contribution, and we keep on tracking what is happening. I know there's an area which you have not done so much, and that is to track the finances that all these players are investing in the climate change work. We need to make sure the money that's being invested is really benefiting the people on the ground. And I think the approach now should be that whosoever is supporting countries like Malawi, they must ensure that 70% of the money that's coming really goes to the communities. Unfortunately, some of these policies are also pushed by the development partners themselves, Global North, or wherever it is. You realize they'll give you, for example, let's say $50 million US, and then maybe half of it, or maybe 60-70% of it goes to studies. Studies are okay, studies are good, but how do we utilize something that has already been done in the past? They'll be spent on flights, consultancies, and then money goes back to where it came from. Only just a little is used for implementation on the ground, and we are not delivering the change that we would like to see. So, in as far as climate change issues are concerned, those are some of the things that we have been able to do. But we also have waste management as a big issue here in Malawi. I think we are really struggling. We are not doing best. We have got city councils, city authorities that not have even a single vehicle for refuse collection and all that. It's bad as that. We have got industries that continue to discharge wastewater into our water bodies. Just today, at least, we have some good news. One company has been fined 10 million Malawi kwacha for discharging wastewater. We had to fight for this. We had to go there, take pictures, put on the social media, push the authorities to punish this company. And it's been a struggle, but today we got news that they've been punished. And these are some of the small victories that really encourage some of us. Last year, we contributed in making sure that one of the companies that was producing thin plastics, because Malawi banned these thin plastics, but there was one company which was still producing these thin plastics. We had to investigate, establish the company, report to authorities. We fought through the matter in the courts until the company was closed. The whole machinery was uprooted from the premises. That gives that kind of hope that we need. So there is hope when we see these small victories. And I know that with time, they will add up, and then people will begin to understand why we keep on saying no to certain things.
Well, I just want to commend you for the work that you do. I know it's difficult work, but the work of truth speaking is the work that's going to lead to change. And apparently it has in Malawi. So I just want to affirm that and honor you for that.
Thanks, Prof. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, but also to speak to whoever is listening to the program right now. Thank you.
We've been in conversation with Mathews Malata, environmental journalist and president of the Association of Environmental Journalists in Malawi. If you'd like to learn more about the work of AEJ or to access some of Mathews' articles and video news reports, be sure to check out the show notes for this episode on the podcast website. If you appreciate this podcast and want to help us expand its global reach, please share this episode with a friend. You can also show your support by subscribing. Just go to whatever platform you listen to podcasts on and hit the subscribe or follow button for the Earthkeepers podcast. Finally, it would be very helpful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. I'm Forrest Ginsley, your podcast host. Our executive producer is James Amadon. Our producer is Dave Ulfers. Forrest Reed is our editor and the creator of our original music. Our research assistant is Rochelle Nordman, and Jesselyn Gentry is our social media director. Thank you, friends, for listening. And please join us for our next conversation on the Earthkeepers podcast.